Okay, one big surprise that came at me when I was growing up. It was when I was quite young. I don't know how old I was. 9, 10. Must have been older than that. I'll explain why now in a minute. Must have been about 11 or 12, I reckon, when I was. We started going for some no apparent reason on Fridays and Saturdays up to people's houses. Now, like, you know, as you just listened, I was no stranger to travelling around people's houses, and going and travelling here, there, and everywhere, which was fine. Used to that. But then we started going to these people's houses, which I didn't know. Didn't know anything. Didn't know. I didn't really care. In all honesty, I don't think. It was just to get out of the house. It's something to do. Go for a walk. Play with other people's toys. My mum and my dad, especially my dad, then spent a long time talking to these strangers. Basically, I didn't know who they were, and this went on for a while. And I'm sure visits went on whilst me and Claire were in school and stuff like that. And one day, my dad turned around to me and Claire and said that the bizarre thing was, as he was adopted. Didn't know nothing about it. And these people we were seeing over the last few days, months, he was trying to find his real mother, and he had found her. And she was living about an hour's drive up the road, up near Abergavenny, up in the valleys. And we were going to see her. Now, this was like, you know, wow. You know, the people you knew as granddad and grandma, they weren't in reality. But at the same time, because I was brought up with those, like, you know, they were my grandmother, they were my grandfather, they were my dad's mum and dad, even though they weren't. He'd been adopted from a very, very young age, always knew he was adopted. And I suppose he thought it was a good time to go and find his mother, basically. Yeah, we didn't treat Nan and Grandad in London any differently, me and Claire. Not at all. We were brought up with those. They were our Nan and Grandad. But to find out that we had another grandmother, that was a bit of a shock. So we got in a car, and he told us we were going to see his real mum. Mad, isn't it? So we got in a car and we drove off to Abergavenny. Now, whether or not my mum and dad had been there before they took me and Claire, I don't know. But we pulled up in the street, and my dad went in, and when he came back out, he got us, and we walked in. Now, the house wasn't in a good state of repair, shall we say. It was a bit messy on the inside. But we were greeted with this very small woman. I mean, very small, slightly hunched over, and her hands were bent over, double with arthritis. She had such small hands, she had small baby hands. It was mad. But the fascination, everything else, apart from like the mess of the house and stuff like that, you took in everything, because this was a fascination of seeing my father's real mother. You know, I looked at her and I looked at my dad, and yeah, you could see bizarre resemblance. And then not horrible, it wasn't horrible at all. The weirdest thing was then, I looked over at my sister and then looked back at my grandmother. Now that was scary. That was scary. I've seen pictures as well of my grandmother. Yeah, and it was quite scary. And I was actually quite fascinated Can't remember what she said or how she talked or anything like that. So I said I'm pretty sure my mum and dad went there a lot more than what me and Claire did, only because obviously a real mother and getting to use her. But found out at some point then that she had to move out of her house, and she moved into a care home. I'm still up in Abergavenny. Now, how I think I know it, I was like 10 or 12. But I was over 11, so I was 11 or 12 years old. I know that it was because we were having a fun run, a 6-mile fun run in my secondary school, and I was in training for it. And I remember going up there, and right next door to the nursing home in Abergavenny was a rugby pitch, and I used to go down there and run circles around the rugby pitch in training whilst my dad was in talking with his mum. That's how I know the age. But it was my first experience of a care home, and even at that age, it was a horrible, horrible place. It was horrible. It was grey, grey walls, grey floor, grey ceilings. And not very friendly staff, I don't think. I can't quite remember. You blank out the bad stuff, don't you? And not too pleasant smell. It had that, not to sound degrading, but it had that old people smell, you know what I mean? It wasn't very good. The room she was in was small, it was pokey, had a bed, a window, a desk, and that was about it, and everything was there. But on the positive side, she was more talkative, and she always greeted us with a smile, and she always had a chat. And she gave my sister a few presents, a few things, which she said, a perspex bracelet, which she said was made from a Messerschmitt cockpit. Whether or not that is true or not, I don't know. I don't think Claire ever checked it out. But they had a lot of questions. So, my mum and my dad and stuff talked to her a lot, and and then came the horrible part. Again, my dad sat us down and unfortunately informed me and Claire that she had passed away. That was a kick in the nuts. That really was a kick in the nuts. And again, in the many firsts for me, it was the first time I had seen a dead body. We went to the chapel, and they had put her in her coffin, obviously, and you could go and say your goodbyes. And I just remember it was going up to the side of the coffin and looking over. And of course, she was such a small woman. This box, it looked like a bloody shoebox, it was horrible. And all you could see was her hands in front of her and her face. That's what you could see. And they had put her in this lace thing, white garment, and it just looked like she had no legs and no feet, because it was horrible. I remember seeing her, staring at her for 5 seconds and starting to cry, and I went outside. It just freaked me out. It wasn't a nice day for me, the funeral, seeing everyone upset, especially my dad. It was horrible. But growing up, my dad, he was my hero. He, growing up, I wanted to be more like my dad than anything else. I didn't have sports stars or pop stars or anything like that growing up. It was, no, I'm going to be like my dad, because my dad is strong, he's cool, he smokes, and all that sort of stuff. But now that facade had gone, and there he was in front of me crying his eyes out. After all, he just lost his real mum. The person he had spent so long looking for, spent so much time, and he had just a short time to get used to her and get to know her and try to find information why he was adopted and all this sort of stuff. The major change in him, I think, after the funeral was my dad. He was a smoker. He wasn't a heavy smoker, but he was a smoker. He started to smoke like a chimney. Yeah, he chain smoked for months. Again, kicking the nuts to find your real mum and then to lose her again. But thankfully, after a bit of time, he reverted back to being dad. He did revert back to being dad, but I think as anyone knows, having those scars and his loss, those things will never leave him, I don't think, as would they anywhere. I don't think. It wasn't a very nice time. I never asked about his real father, and he never brought it up. So, yeah, very odd times around then, you know. But we're still here and we're still going.